Deadline is fast approaching on mortgage interest relief, and the government has warned it won't be extending the scheme.
It can reduce the amount you have to pay back each month on your mortgage. And property and personal finance expert Carl Dieter is here to tell us why the December 31st cut-off is so important, because it is the cut-off, Carl.
Yeah, it's one of those things that when it's gone, it's gone. And what people might miss out on is if you were thinking of buying a house and you drew down your mortgage this year and another person was buying a similar house at the same time, but they only drew theirs down next year, then they won't get this. It's called tax relief at source, and it's basically a deduction from your mortgage payment based on the amount of interest paid. Now, it can be as much as over €400, just over €400 at the top end. That would mean you'd have to buy an expensive house and pay a lot of interest to do it. But for your average person, you're looking at about, say, €170 off per month. So if you take an example that one person buys at 200,000, I worked out the figures earlier, they would be paying about $830 a month. Now, if someone bought next year, even if the price fell 10% and they bought it $180,000 and they had a smaller mortgage, their payments would be $900 a month. So because it's tax relief, you'd actually be paying less for a more expensive house than you would if you waited until next year.
We're up around 30%, isn't it? 30% mortgage interest relief. The
way it actually works is when people buy a house, each person gets an allocation of €10,000. Now, if your mortgage interest is only, say, €8,000, well, then that's all it is. It's just if you had two people together and the total mortgage interest was $15,000, it would kind of eat into the second person's allowance. They take 25% of that in year 1 and 2, and then it reduces down. Now, it's going to end in 2017. So it's effectively really like a 5-year benefit at this stage. It used to go for 7 years. But the big thing about it is that it goes on the drawdown of your mortgage, and it's dealt with by the tax relief at source department down in Limerick. If you haven't drawn down your loan, then you're not going to get it, and you'll miss out on something that will take thousands off your payment.
So must you have made your first mortgage repayment before December 31st?
In order to get it down, yeah. And typically it's to a maximum of 2 people. It was something that I was trying to query with Revenue about whether 3 people could do it, but in our experience, we don't see much of that. I suppose much like in relationships, you don't see many
really
successful
have 3 in a
ways.
relationship.
Doesn't kind of work.
Generally doesn't work.
Or else it makes the front page. You know, it goes one of 2 ways.
Carl, do you think as well that it is putting people under pressure to buy, that it has done, say, this year to buy a property?
Well, this has been well flagged, so I would hope that it's not something that's putting people under pressure to buy. If people are acting rationally, and they've known about this for several years now, because this was proposed, by the way, when Fianna Fail were still in power, was to end mortgage interest relief. It got an extension for another year. So it's been very well documented that this is not going to continue. The reason for that is that property prices are now at a point where they feel they don't need to assist people because the prices are so attractive. In the past, it used to be a case that everyone felt bad for first-time buyers because prices were so high. It's no longer the case. We've seen that certainly in cities, even in desirable areas, that prices are within the reach of people who would typically be buying in those areas anyway.
Oh yeah, but that's if you can get the money from the bank.
That's another story, isn't it?
That's the hard bit, yeah. I heard something on the television yesterday that 2/3 of mortgage applications are being accepted, and I just don't see how that's true. I mean, what we do when people call us is we put their data into mortgage calculators for all the lenders, and we know straight away whether they're going to make it or not. So what they've done is they've applied and they've been rebutted at the broker stage, but the banks don't keep broker records. So at least 1/3 of what they're considering or what they're trying to talk about, they don't actually know about, and then you've got another amount which never make it beyond an initial inquiry, etc. So I'm very confident those statistics are
so
just
those stats
mad.
are really drawn off people who've gone directly to the bank?
Primarily off people who've gone directly to the bank and who've gone through a full application process. Let's not forget that you won't even get in front of an underwriter. Your case doesn't get there until someone has looked at it and made sure it stacks up. So when it gets in, it falls down on a technicality within the bank accounts or within some consideration of your overall pay that makes the underwriter say no. It's all the people that never get to that point are unaccounted for. I would say it's more like 8 in 10 refusals on that basis.
But what do you think is necessary? Because we see the central bank is coming out and saying, look, I mean, their relationship with the banks is more like a teenager-parent style relationship. And not much seems to be happening. I mean, that's just outrageous when you hear them saying that. But what now? I mean, what is going to make them lend?
I don't know. I'm personally going to start to resort to prayer because I've given up on everything else. It's a frustrating situation, especially, I mean, think about it. Our central bank has said that lenders are acting like teenagers. What other country would you get that in?
I just can't believe
it's astounding. It's incredible, but not in the good sense. I mean, it just lacks credibility. It's because the banks have put off and put off and put off dealing with problems. We gave them 64 billion euro, and they only had two things to do in return for getting 64 billion euro. Lend money and deal with their losses. They're not doing either. So I just think that we have been incredibly had to the tune of 64 billion euro. I mean, if you turn every euro into a second, 64 billion seconds ago, Jesus hadn't been born. I mean, it's just absolutely phenomenal. 64 billion years ago was 15 times longer than life has even existed on Earth. So these are massive numbers. It's actually hard to get your head around just how huge it is and how little we've gotten in return. And I think that the banks and certainly the Secretary General of the Department of Finance, who also gave them a clip on the air on the same topic, are really just expressing the frustration that has been in industry and with regular people on the street for some time in dealing with the banks. They're not doing what they said they do, so they're not sticking to their end of the deal, but they still got the money. The problem we made is we paid up front to get them to do their end afterwards, and now they're not. So it's like paying a builder to do a job and they don't show up. It's kind of after the fact. It's hard to undo that.
And of course then there's the big ticking time bomb of all these buy-to-let investors that they say they're not properly dealing with at all, who probably will never be able to repay their debts.
Yeah, but buy-to-let is a very, very tricky area. And what you've seen is that a lot of the lenders have started to appoint rent receivers, which means it's someone who goes in and takes the rent, because 20% of those loans have problems in terms of the number of them. But that doesn't mean that 20% of buy-to-let properties are vacant. What it means is that people find themselves up against a wall, and then they realize that, well, the bank can't easily repossess me. It's a long, drawn-out process, and I think that potentially could be a mistake of its own. In our effort to protect people, we've actually offered them an umbrella from their creditors, which can drag out for quite a while. So they see this as a brand of cash flow in some instances, and that just frustrates the whole process. Obviously, you've got people who can't make ends meet, but within buy-to-let, it's an absolute minefield of different types of problems for different reasons. You've got very genuine cases who represent the vast majority, and then you've got what I would call the nefarious investors, and they're saying to themselves, listen, I'm so far underwater. I mean, imagine we're out swimming and Martin takes me down 200 meters below the surface, and he's got scuba gear, I don't, and then he says, well, I can bring you down another 50 meters. I'm never going to get back to fresh air. And that's the way borrowers are. So if you're someone who's on the surface, we'll say that you're up there swimming away, and you're wondering, why is he doing what he's doing? It's because when you're lost and you can't get back, it doesn't matter how deep in the water you are. You get to a certain point where borrowers just give up the ghost and they try to extract any good they can from that loan, which is otherwise just a huge millstone around their neck, and the only thing they can get is those cash flows.
Well, Carl, I'd love to say it's been great talking to you, but in fact, you know, you've just brought us down again.
Well,
but,
I'd like to think that when I'm giving the bad news, I try to smile, so it hopefully numbs it out just a little.
He's got a good smile. All right, Carl.
Thanks, Carl.
All right, bye-bye. After the break, is it time to shout stop when it comes to the weight of school bags? And are our children destined to develop back problems when they're older? Don't go away. We'll talk about that in a minute.
You're very welcome back. Now, there is growing evidence that back problems can often start early in life, something we ignore at our peril when it comes to the weight of the school bags many of our children have to carry to class each day.
Well, I visited St John's National School in Clondalkin in Dublin to find out what they're doing to try and prevent students storing up back problems for the future. I'm just wondering how many of us woke up today with an aching back. Well, backache and back pain for adults is something that can start from a very young age. And the reason for some of it in our children is this: the school bag. How many parents have given out about the weight of these? But how do you pack them properly? And are there things we can do to help our children to alleviate any potential problems in their adulthood? Well, I'm here at St.
Weekends with Old El Paso fajitas. Make them as adventurous as you like with jalapenos. Make them as sensuous as you